In the remote Arkansas hills, the brutal murder of Connie Franklin shocks a small town until he inexplicably reappears alive, turning the trial of his alleged killers into a surreal mystery of identity, justice, and hidden truths. In this almost certainly not companion series, we examine each episode's origins, production process, behind the scenes, personal thoughts, and most likely go off on some tangents in spite of our best efforts. In this episode, we examine The Man Who Died Twice. I'm Layla Lawrence.
And I'm Dan Lauer.
And this is Possibly Not. So diving into this the way we normally do you remember how you first heard or found this story?
No. Moving on.
Okay, great.
No. Sorry. No. I don't.
No further questions, Your Honor.
Yeah. But I have. This is often referred to. I can't remember where I first came upon it or encountered it. I don't remember what I listened to. I don't remember what I saw, but I do remember that, and you'll see this. This is a story that's been told. It's often referred to as the Arkansas Ghost Trial, which makes it, I think is a horrible title because it kind of makes you think something's going to happen that doesn't. And I know what they're implying, but I think that's, well, I don't know. It's almost like somebody, like they're doing it on the internet, and it's sort of the title is misleading to draw
like
people in or
clickbaity.
Something. Oh, is there a word for it?
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
But I suppose it's like one of those kind of like, urban legend type things, which I suppose they do get kind of weird titles for those. This also, when I looked it up, there are variations on the theme as well. There are sort of different versions of the story floating around out there. So I'm imagining this is something that has been told many, many times.
Yeah, it's not even variations on the theme; it's variations on the facts. It was rural Arkansas in 1929, so the facts aren't that stout. That being said, we're going to get into how this video is sort of a departure, but I thought for anybody who gets this far, we could give them basically a more concise timeline of events.
Yes, yeah.
At least the events that this is the timeline I built to base the script on. And it's like, we'll get into how this episode is a little bit different in the way it's presented. I know some of this is missed, but I thought we could just do the people a favor who haven't heard this story covered in a more traditional way and just give them, bullet points.
Yeah, it's definitely more cinematic, this storytelling. So would you like to get into how it starts?
Yes. So early 1929, Connie Franklin, a 22-year-old drifter, arrives in St. James, Arkansas, and begins working as a farmhand. At the same time, he courts Tillar Ruminer, a 16-year-old local girl.
Then 9 March 1929, Connie Franklin and Tillar Ruminer allegedly go to the woods near Dry Creek with several others, including Herman Greenway, Joe White, Bill Cummings, and Alex Folks. Tillar later claims Franklin was attacked, beaten, mutilated, and burned alive while she was assaulted but managed to escape. Other witnesses claim to have seen the attack but fled before Franklin was killed. There is a conflicting report. Some locals say no such attack happened, and Franklin simply left town.
Spring to summer 1929, Franklin is presumed dead, and rumors of his murder begin to spread. Authorities hesitate to investigate, though, due to a lack of a body, but pressure in the community begins to build.
And then in September 1929, so just after that, Tillar Ruminer provides an official statement alleging Franklin was murdered by Greenway, White, Cummings, and Folks, the other men who were in the woods with them. The authorities finally begin searching for remains, but find only bone fragments and a charred tooth, so no confirmation that they belonged to Franklin.
I will also insert there that there's a variation in facts here, and some say because you just listed 4 names, and some
Mm-hmm.
say the night where Tiller gave her outcry testimony, she accused 5 men.
Mm-hmm.
Um, some say 4, some say 5. Then in December of 1929, Greenway, White, Cummings, and Folks are arrested and charged with the murder of Connie Franklin, and the case gains national attention due to the grisly details and lack of a confirmed body.
And then the following year, the 9 January 1930, a man claiming to be Connie Franklin appears in Humphrey, Arkansas. But he is identified as Marion Franklin Rogers, a farmhand with a similar history and age to Connie Franklin. Again, there is a conflicting report here. Some locals, including Franklin's father, claim this is not the same Connie Franklin.
On 20 February 1930, Rogers, still claiming to be Franklin or Franklin himself, testifies in court at the trial, insisting he was never murdered, but simply left town after an argument. But simply left town after an argument with Ruminer. Tilla Ruminer, though, sticks to her story, claiming the man testifying is an imposter, and her fiance Connie Franklin was indeed murdered that night.
Then in spring of 1930, despite the conflicting testimony, the court finds all accused men not guilty, and that's due to lack of evidence and Franklin's apparent reappearance. The case remains one of the most bizarre legal mysteries in Arkansas history.
And then just to button it up, the aftermath of this, Marion Franklin Rogers or Connie Franklin or both or neither continues living under that name, later moving to Missouri and remarrying. He later dies on the side of a road due to complications of appendicitis or burst appendix.
Oh.
And that's sort of where the title comes from. So it's a little bit of a play on words or a little bit of a play on the story. If that was Connie Franklin, that was the first time he died. But he claimed to be Connie Franklin the entire time. So if there was a murder and he also died of appendicitis on the side of a road, the man claiming to be Connie Franklin either died twice or once or
not at all.
not at
He
all.
still walks among us.
He's still alive. Ruminer, for her part, maintained her claim until she died that Franklin was murdered in front of her that night. And historians and people who look at this sort of at all and at large are really divided to this day on whether Rogers was truly Franklin or an imposter.
And even the way that we just quickly did bullet points of this, I mean, it sounds like a film. Like it sounds like it could be so easily made into a feature-length film. Which is where you're kind of taking this with the Almost Certainly Not episode. We're definitely going more into a cinematic feel than we have previously done. And now your background is in filmmaking, so this must be like such a nice, juicy one for you to get your teeth into. Can you kind of explain where you would even start on something like this? I'm sure it can seem like a beast to people who don't really know anything about filmmaking, and even people who do know. I mean, for me, I've only ever known filmmaking from an actor's perspective, really. That's my level of expertise. So looking at something, making something this like cinematic story and connecting the dots through all of these different mediums, I mean, it seems like such almost an insurmountable thing for me. So where do you start with this sort of thing? Do you storyboard? Do you plan? What do you do?
Well, it started at the script because I mean, like I said, I essentially, with more information, what we just read is the research that I did. So I got the timeline in order. And then I just, for whatever reason, inspiration of some kind, I made the opening especially basically as flowery as I could. Almost sort of like I actually looked up on Amazon some what people consider to be classic romance novels and read the free sample of that to sort of get a feel for the language and sort of
Okay.
to see my best if I could sort of mimic that because it becomes such a bizarre dark story and I just wanted to juxtapose that. So it started there. That was already a little different than the stuff that we've done.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and I was into the process of editing, including the chapter breaks or the parts, um, the widescreen presentation, um,
Just
the
like the normal and almost certainly not sort of formula.
yeah. And when I got into it, I was like, I don't know, it sort of evolved, even from the cuts that I showed you to what it later became. And then I thought, well, Um, just because we've been doing it that way, we don't have to.
Yeah.
And so
We're
I
not
guess what's
beholden to a
notable.
network or something like that.
Well, yeah, and I want things to feel consistent, but well, to be frank, I mean, so we've done 5 videos that basically follow the exact same format, and it's fine to have a format, but looking at this more, I thought this doesn't need um part breaks and
Mm-hmm.
titles for different chapters. It can be the closest that we've come to a short film,
Yeah.
rather than a video presentation. And so I sort of had that idea. I ripped all the part breaks out. I changed the title card from what we use standardly. And then I was thinking more about it and I thought, well, it's 1929. It would be interesting to present this as though people at the time, like, what would they have seen if they were watching a movie of this?
Yeah, it reads
Uh,
very like sort of campfire story as well.
that and then so and I don't know how deep we want to get into aspect ratios, but widescreen presentation or like a YouTube video that occupies the entire screen that they give
Mm-hmm.
you is 16:9, or
Mm-hmm.
I think it's 177 to 1. And I'll just very quickly, for anybody who doesn't understand what that means, that's a way of describing the format of the media or the display that you're using. And so it's a ratio. So 16:9 or 177 to 1 is the ratio of the width to the height. So it's unit based. So when you hear somebody say that something's 16:9, which is what most video presentations are in, that's if you have 1 unit of length, it's 16 wide of that unit to 9 tall.
Mm-hmm. Like a
So
landscape format, basically, for layman's
ba-
terms, almost.
basically, and that's true. That's widescreen video. It's basically 16:9 is video, 177 or 181 to 1 is what they would say in film. And so that's what we present in. That's what YouTube's default is, except for the short stuff, which is vertical. But I thought, well, it'd be interesting to have this presented in 4:3 or 4:3, which means that it's almost square. It's just one unit wider than it
Yeah.
is tall,
I
which
do
is the way
love
that
that as well, like how it sort of starts out in the widescreen and then you sort of shrink it down. Oh, gives me chills. I
yeah.
love it.
And I'm hoping that people will be caught by that. Like what is this?
Yeah.
And then I even added an effect of an 8mm sprocket, because that's what you would see if you blow up a 4:3 and try and present it widescreen. Unless you do some cleanup,
Mm-hmm.
you'll see that sprocket hole. So I wanted to give it a very authentic look, which is why everything's also very, very stark contrast monochrome, almost a noir vibe. And um, I don't know, I got kind of obsessed about this and
You?
while trying to
What?
achieve that format and what my inspirations are. And there's a couple that I already have, but it's very, very heavily reliant on two things. One is post World War One, pre World War II German expressionist film, like Metropolis or The Cabinet of Dr. Caligari, or Nosferatu, even, um, which is
Not the
they
new
use
one.
they use a lot of well, interestingly, well, I was going to say that they use a lot of very stark contrast. They use a lot of like opacity layers to put two images on top of each other, and are more concerned with the feeling given
Mm-hmm.
than the story told, especially because they were soundless or no dialogue, so they
Well,
would have
and
to achieve a lot without the character speaking.
to the credit of what you're doing, and I am going to pay you a compliment, so brace thyself. We literally just watched a cut of this before we recorded this, and that was what I said to you, wasn't it? Like, I normally, when we watch cuts together, I'll have some notes or like some things to add into it. I mean, not a lot. It's because obviously you are very adept at what you're doing, but I couldn't even, like, the feeling that I got just from watching that cut, I couldn't even give notes. I was just so into it. I wanted it to just keep going. It was so good. And I will say, just if you've got this far and you haven't watched the Almost Certainly Not episode, The Man Who Died Twice, I would say to pause this and go and watch that episode before you continue with this, because we are getting a little bit more into the technical side of things, and you won't really have a basis for that if you haven't watched the episode.
And I would also suggest, like, what's wrong? Like, why would you do that if you're doing that right now?
Well, because some people stumble upon videos and then they get into them and they're like, oh, this sounds interesting. And then they, don't really know. So I just want to give sort of the benefit of the doubt, and also just a gentle sort of, hey, if you haven't seen the episode, this is definitely one that I think you need to watch the episode before you listen to us waffle on about this for however long we end up talking.
Well, I just want to ask that person, gentle is the way that I think you put it. I want to ask them two questions. What's wrong with you, and why are you so stupid? And, well, a third question, actually. Are your shoes Velcro?
Nothing wrong with Velcro shoes, man.
It just speaks
Nothing
to...
wrong.
Anyway, you're correct. If somebody's managed to get this far, that's a mistake. You've made a mistake.
You've made a grave error.
Yeah.
So you're not really storyboarding or anything like that. You were kind of just going with the vibe. Like you kind of put it together the way our normal episodes are put together, and then something was just feeling off to you.
It wasn't feeling off necessarily, but I thought this is an opportunity to break format and to do something more interesting. And I'm still doing all of the, we don't have an editor. Well, we have me, but we don't have a third party editor, and I'm kind of getting locked into
Would you
that.
even be okay with a third party? I feel like you would want control over it.
Well, I would, because I would still direct. It would be like working with an editor when you've directed something, where like I would have them do the grunt work and do an assembly cut, and then we could go through it, or I could just take it over at that point. But you're right. I mean, there would be a little bit of like, just get out of my way, and I'll do it faster.
Yeah, that's what I feel like would happen, honestly.
And that's happened anytime I've been a boss. As frightening as I'm sure that sounds to you, I have on several occasions. And it's actually part of the work of being a boss, is learning that you have to let them learn.
You have to delegate, yeah.
Yeah, as opposed to just being like, it's going to take me twice as long to fucking explain this to you. Just get out of my way, and I'll get it done faster.
It's like letting toddlers do things for themselves, where it's going to take so much longer, but you're like, oh God, I know you have to learn this. I know that there's going to be a mess, and I know I'm going to have to clean it up, but I just have to let you do this by yourself.
If we got to that point where we could afford somebody, and they had, like, I would look at some reels of, things that, like a sizzle reel or something of things that they had done, and show them our episodes and say,
show them everything they're doing wrong.
No. I mean, even before they were hired, be like, I want you to, like, your job will be to, because like the grunt work would be good to like cut your audio, like clean it up so it's like all of the false starts and everything is clean. Do the mixing, layer in the images, the things that we always have consistently, like the opening and the closing, and then give them access to stock footage. And even if they're doing very basic, well, Layla's talking about a pumpkin, so let me find footage of a pumpkin, for instance. I don't know. I found that funny for some reason. I couldn't think of another thing.
Pumpkins.
But
It's the great pumpkin, Charlie Brown.
As an example, that's what I would say. Like, basically, you don't have to get too creative. Just whatever she's talking about, try to find something that matches that.
Yeah.
And then I could go in and I would absolutely do that because it's the grunt work of that, the repetitive nature of it, and that gets a little tedious. That stuff.
So share this shit with your friends so we can afford to get an editor.
Yeah. Or an assistant editor, maybe. But,
yeah.
But so I don't know. I was just staring at it. We did.
Well, you have actually, a really lengthy background in filmmaking.
Yeah, mostly as a writer. The only, like, filmmaking wise, the only you can call me a professional screenwriter in as much as I've been paid on several occasions to write screenplays. Some of which have been produced, some of which have not, but they're all terrible. So I'm not going to name them. But I have been involved in the post-production process because producers are, I've yet to meet a film producer who wasn't, like, obviously somebody's cousin or didn't just fail upward. They never know what they're doing.
I don't even know if that's just limited to film producers. I think because, my background is also in theater. Like, I think producers in general are just like, they come in with money and big ideas and they're like, hey, let's do this. And then it's up to everybody else on the team to be like, fuck, no, what? No. Here are all the reasons why this cannot be done this way.
My feeling is essentially that if you knew shit about shit, you would be something other than a producer. I say that knowing that we're credited as co-producers in the credits. But anyway, so yes, I have had to attempt to unfuck what they fucked up when filming my script. Mm-hmm. My favorite one of those, I was hired to write a horror movie about a woman who was a sleepwalking cannibal.
A sleepwalking cannibal.
Yeah.
So she didn't cannibalize in her waking hours. She did it while she was sleepwalking.
Yeah. So, look, Scarlett, the money was green.
Okay. Yeah, that sounds right in your wheelhouse. Sounds like something you really enjoy.
I hated it. It was awful, and they needed it done in like 3 weeks, but they paid me $3,000, which I really needed that $3,000. So it was whatever.
Speaking about being young and dumb, though, just really quickly, I don't think we've ever talked about how we met on any of these. And this kind of leads into the filmmaking background and my background as an actress as well.
Yeah, I wrote a script. We met on a casting.
Yeah?
I almost said couch. At a casting
call. Casting couch. There was probably a couch in the room.
It was a class.
Full Sail University.
I'm cutting that. They get no promotion. I don't think there was a couch. It was a classroom. But yeah, I had written a mockumentary script that I was a former student. I think I just graduated, but they would let you. They would have audition days, and so they would let you basically.
It was like once a month, wasn't it? Once a month they had audition days.
And they would let you just had to get your name on the list, and they would give you a whole classroom on a Saturday. And then actors and actresses would come and just
and the university that I went to was like just down the road as well.
Yeah. So I was auditioning. I don't remember if that whole day was just for the female part, Kelly. I was probably seeing both.
I have no idea. I know that I auditioned for you and I auditioned for a music video. And I think it was the same day. And it was some like country music person.
I just remember that
for their music video.
I had a lot of like I probably saw. Well, you know what? I had already cast the male lead, so it probably was just to find Kelly. It was probably the whole day, but it was like 6 hours and dozens and dozens and dozens of actresses. Some of whom were fine, some of whom were terrible. I mean, like anything else, or some of them were
one who was brilliant.
I would keep people because there were sides that were a page or two long that I was reading against the actress. I was doing the male part, and that took, I don't know, 90 seconds to read and a little bit of discussion maybe. Maybe your memory of this is better about what
I don't
exactly.
remember anything. I'm going to be honest with you.
Okay.
I don't remember anything about us first meeting. So
But
anything that you can impart will be news to me because I don't remember.
well, there was just something about it because I remember I don't know the exact time, but I think that I probably spent 2 or 3 minutes with most of them, and for whatever there was some kind of spark right away because I think you were in the room for like 10 minutes. Um and I think you told me after the fact that it was funny because you had gone with a friend who I was not interested in immediately.
Oh my
Um
God, you're right.
and I think that you've like maybe like if you had gone, I think maybe you even told me that you talked like he like for her she was like I was in that I was like it was like 30 seconds. He kept you in there for like 12 minutes or something.
Yes. Oh my God, you're absolutely right. I did go with a friend.
Um but
I think I
then
wasn't even really like intending to properly like put any effort into auditioning. I think I was just
well,
going for moral support.
yeah, and I mean the role of Kelly is sort of a ditzy kind of oh
Careful.
yeah, she's like blonde. She's blonde without being a blonde. I mean,
Uh-huh.
if that makes sense. And so anyway, that's not the point. The point is that you were perfect as soon as you open your mouth.
And I was young. I was definitely still in college then. So I was like probably 20, I don't know, 21, 20, something like that. I was
Well,
young.
I think I'm 3 years older than you. Three
I'm
and a half.
38 now, so
I'm 41, yeah, so I'm 3 years older than
yeah.
you. So I would have been 24, 25. But I offered you the role, and then we shot some stuff. I think I took you out to dinner just to talk about this, like to give you the whole script and to get ready
Mm-hmm.
for it. But we just shot interview. It was a mockumentary, so we shot interview
Yeah.
stuff.
I mean, criminal, honestly, that whole thing wasn't shot because I thought it was really good.
We just needed them. We didn't get the money together. That's what the point of the
Yeah.
trailer was for. So, which so often happens. But then, um, we became friends, and then periodically, I think it's gone the other way. I've asked you to do things, to do commercial, like promos for me or voice
Mm-hmm.
stuff. And I think here and there you've asked me to read stuff, or I think I've written you a monologue. But it
Yeah.
tends to go in that direction.
But just in case any big producers are listening and not and have lots of money, there are several screenplays that we would like to get made. If you if you somehow connect with the two of us, we could be brilliant. We just need money.
Well,
That's my
one
pitch.
one of
That's
us
my
could
elevator pitch.
be brilliant and keep the other one in line, I guess. I'm not going to say who's who.
Young, dumb, and full of
Complete.
commiserating with each other. Anyway, so back to the story. I think we've gone off. That was definitely a tangent. Back to the story. So there are several versions of this story of Connie Franklin and Tilla Rumina and just everything that happened that night. How true do you think your chosen version of this story is?
Well, I like the way you put that because there's a distinction with a difference there, which is the distance between true and fact.
Mm-hmm.
I would say that it's based on the information that's available, that it's entirely true, in as much as everything that is stated, there is a source for. So I didn't fictionalize. So it's true, but it's not factual because it can't be, because one, it's a kind of an unsolved mystery, and two, like you experience, like everybody who tries to get through this story will experience, there's no single set of facts. So it
It
became
is so confusing.
well, and that's why I thought, well, fuck it. I've got your voiceover tells the story and the way that we wanted to tell it. I can get a little bit more expressionistic and experimental with the images, and they don't have to Well, I guess going back to my earlier example, just because you're talking about a pumpkin doesn't mean I have to show a pumpkin. I could show something
Yeah.
else to juxtapose it,
Yeah.
or to give a different sort of feeling. And well, and so I mentioned German expressionism earlier, like Fritz Lang and F.W. Murnau. But I also wanted to mention, or it would be sort of criminal to not, because it's a very recent example, and oddly somebody who just remade Nosferatu, but the Dave Eggers film, The Lighthouse, I
Mm-hmm.
kind of stole his format a little. He did the same exact thing. That's in 4:3 and black and white, stark contrast. I love that film.
You were influenced by it.
I ripped him off. But he did what he ripped off that style of filmmaking. You know, that's that the great ones borrow, or the good ones borrow and the great ones steal. So I just stole it, but that was
I
another
think
influence.
perhaps like parts of the story might be true. I feel like as stories kind of evolve in these smaller towns and more rural areas, it's like one thing is true and then that one thing gets embellished upon.
Well,
And then something
how
else gets embellished upon, perhaps.
here's how I look at our presentation. It's a folk tale.
Yeah, that's a really good way of putting it.
So and I would say that as opposed to urban legend, because an urban legend has no basis in fact, but a folk tale
Mm-hmm.
is usually based on something that probably occurred that got embellished upon later. And I think I would say that this is a modern retelling of a 1920s folk tale, something that sort of snowballed. And so I became less concerned than I've ever been about precision with facts than being precise with the what's our true version of the story, if that makes
Mm-hmm.
sense.
Yeah. And it's, may I say, beautifully done.
Whatever.
Truly. No, truly, just like the whole style of it. One of my favorite parts of it, though, is the courtroom, kind of, when Tilla goes to I guess it's not the courtroom, and Tilla goes to the sheriff's office. And I love how that turns into more of like a comic kind of style. I don't know where you found that or what inspired that, if that was like a conscious decision you made or you just came across those images, but like I love that.
No, I produce those.
What do you mean you produce those?
I produce them.
You created them?
I had some AI help. You know.
What do you mean? Are you laughing at me? What? I don't know what's happening.
No, I said I had some AI help.
Oh, I didn't hear you say that. Oh, okay. So it was something that you had in your mind that you wanted that kind of change there.
Yeah.
Like like a courtroom illustration kind of thing.
Exactly. And so I had some help generating the figures, and then I photoshopped backgrounds and put them where I wanted them and changed the perspective and stuff like that.
What made you do that? Was it kind of like a courtroom illustration vibe that you wanted for it? Or, I mean, what made you even think about doing that?
Not really. It's in a sheriff's office. I thought that like the kinetic energy of the images would maybe like give people a breather and let them focus on like a series. It's a series of 5 images that progress through the story of her coming in and ultimately like being kind of overwhelmed with emotions to sit on top of the narration. So when I was, because I got the figures generated via AI, and then I manipulated them into Photoshop, and then I also edit them in a way where there's this doubling, almost prism effect.
Yes.
And so I thought it would just be a little bit of a breather. It's not actually a courtroom, but it was more like an illustration, maybe what would have appeared in a newspaper of the time if they didn't have an actual picture. Sort of something in that. I just thought it would be an interesting. Yeah, I just thought it would be interesting to present it in that way.
I think it's great. I think it's one of my favorite bits in the whole thing. So if someone lied about this, I mean, Tilla was the one who told the story. Tilla was the one. So do we know for a fact? I guess we don't know anything for a fact, but do we know a little bit more certainly that Tilla did go into the sheriff's office and share this story? I suppose that is one of the only things that is relatively true about this.
Oh yeah, I mean, these men were arrested and they were tried based on her testimony and investigation. And there's some stuff that like left out, that there were rumblings about this. And obviously we open with a woman named Bertha Burns, who it's interesting because she lived out more remotely where this would have happened, and she heard noise one night and saw something that sounded like a beating or something that frightening. And so when the trial started, she came forward and said, I think I might have seen the same. I think I was there for that. But she was a little far away, but it obviously didn't sound good. So I think her testimony seemed to corroborate Tiller's account.
But witness testimony is famously just
it shouldn't
unreliable.
be allowed.
Yeah, it's unreliable. So, I mean, maybe that's what she heard, and then she could have been influenced, like she heard the story, and then she was like, oh, yeah, that makes sense. That's what I heard.
It could be, because the men accused were like, not only are we not guilty of this murder, but the murder in question didn't even take place. It's not that it's not that we're not guilty. It's not that you've got the wrong men. It's that the murder that we're being tried for didn't happen. And that was
the murder didn't take place. But do we feel like there could have been a crime that took place because there was blood and was it bone fragment that was found?
And
blood on the stones and bone fragment,
or
something
tooth,
like that.
But like it's like Depression era Arkansas. It might be easier if somebody dies, you can't afford to bury them. You might just throw them on a pyre. Who knows where that came from?
Yeah, true.
And the waters get very muddy with Tiller's outcry testimony in the sheriff's office, because that lays the foundation for a version of the crime. Like, you can't try someone for the same crime twice or in two different ways. You have to have a theory of the crime and a charge. If it's murder, you could try them for murder. If they get let off on murder, you can't say like, well, that didn't work out, so we'll just charge them with assault.
But also it depends on the degree of murder as well, doesn't it? Like, if they're charged with the wrong degree of murder or the wrong form of it, they can be let free. Cough, cough, Casey Anthony, cough, cough. I know that's happened previously.
They won't be let. Well, I mean, there's a different standard for the juries, the jury to determine, like, if it's first degree intentional homicide, first degree murder, then like there's a certain number of criteria that have to be met. Like, you have to be with beyond a reasonable doubt that the person's goal, like they had a plan,
that it was
that they
premeditated.
Called malice of forethought, which is that I am going to kill this person because I want them to be dead. That's the point of what I'm doing. And then there's second degree, which can be like, I beat the shit out of somebody. I only meant to beat them up and they died. So I didn't
intend. It was almost an accident.
Yeah, but you're still responsible.
The death was an accident.
Yeah. But once they charged it as, I don't know. Like, I think that, I mean, it's possible because then we get into this, who is Connie Franklin, Marion Franklin Rogers, or did Connie Franklin actually die that night? This is like, you kind of get to pick your path. It's like pick your own adventure.
Yeah.
One of those old books where like you would turn to a different page depending on if you wanted the protagonist to live or die, where either Connie Franklin, like, his story was that he was beaten up and kind of wandered the hillsides in a daze, but wasn't murdered, wasn't burned, and then reappeared and testified at the trial. And then you've got some people who thought that he definitely was Connie Franklin, and some people, including Connie Franklin's own father, saying that's not my son. But at the time, I mean, fingerprinting, DNA, no. You were lucky to have a photograph of somebody.
Almost a full year later that Marion Franklin Rogers appeared as well. I mean, because if we go back to the timeline, I mean, 9th of March is when Connie and Tiller went into the woods, and then Marion Franklin Rogers appeared 9th of January the following year.
Well, and then also don't forget how long it took. It took her until September to go to the sheriff's office and tell this story.
Yeah. Well, and some stories or some accounts of the story say that she was raped by the men as well.
Oh, I don't think you can say that. You gotta say R-worded.
So my question, I guess, in my mind, I'm like, is Tilla Rumina the real villain here? Did she... I mean, not to say that there was no crime that happened, but I mean, in my mind, I'm kind of like, well, was Connie Franklin kind of in cahoots with these men and they raped this girl and then she kind of wanted to get them all back kind of thing? All worded, yeah. And she was sexually assaulted, should say, by these men, and then she wanted to get them all back. And I don't know. I mean, I don't know if she is like a true villain in this story or...
I think that you can look at it. You can sort of...
It's so
in my
bizarre.
head, it is. In my head, I boil it down to two things. Option one, what she testified to happened. She was assaulted and forced to watch these 4 or 5 men, depending on your source, beat to death, murder, and burn the body of her fiance.
Mm-hmm.
And then for whatever reason didn't... Well, and assault victims sometimes don't come forward right away. So that could be the gap from March to September.
Most of the time. Yeah.
But it's not... I mean, that's typically... Well, I'm not going to get into that. But, if there's a murder of a third party involved, sometimes that changes things. But again, it's 1929. It's almost 100 years ago. Things could not have been more different from a investigation standpoint, an expectation standpoint, how women were treated in the legal system or whether or not they were believed. But
also the area in which this happened as well. It's not like it happened in a big city or something like that. So this is even probably further behind than what just like saying 100 years ago in like New York City is completely different from 100 years ago in rural Arkansas.
And during the Great Depression, so resources were scarce. But so I think that there's really, I mean, you could get into sort of an infinite amount of kind of spider webbing paths off of this, but in my mind, it's either that it happened and those men were guilty of assaulting her or to whatever extent and murdering Connie Franklin, and then there just so happened to be some crazy man named Marion Franklin Rogers who decided it would be fun for attention or something to pretend to be Connie Franklin. And those 4 men on trial for murder are the luckiest men who ever lived.
Yeah,
and
like maybe Marion Franklin Rogers came forward expecting some sort of like fame and money and notoriety. Like he somehow got a whiff of this story and was like, "Oh, I can capitalize on this."
Right, and then so that he poses as Connie Franklin for whatever his motivations are, and then these guilty men get off, or the trial's dismissed, or they're found not guilty because the murder victim can't be standing in the courtroom and you still be guilty of murder.
Obviously.
Or there are some other motivations here for Tiller or Connie, that they made up a story that got out of control, or he left town and she couldn't deal with it, so she concocted this story. So, but option 2 is basically, again, so there's many permutations even of that theory, but the other one is that Marion Franklin Rogers and Connie Franklin were one and the same for the purposes of this story, that Connie Franklin was not murdered, reappeared after some time, showed up to the trial and said, "I'm not dead." And that was actually Connie Franklin. So
do you think that is possible?
I think, and it sort of spoils the fun a little bit almost of like what the truth is, but I think the most reasonable explanation is that because they found bones, the tooth, her outcry, Bertha Burns, the rumors in town. and the people, so many people saying like, what's sort of eerie is that they do have distinct, again, it's 1929, you didn't even have ID cards. Like,
Yeah.
this is a time where you could just move to the next town and change your name and people would be like, okay.
Well, and this man, this Marion Franklin Rogers, nothing is to say that he hadn't been watching Connie Franklin at some point in time, thinking, or maybe he was working with Tiller to assume, to make all of this happen and
This
to
is what I
assume his
mean.
identity.
Yeah, this is what I mean about the spider web, is like, but what if
It really does. There's
why
no
did
like
he-
clear path.
But I would say that it makes more sense to me that, well, what's interesting is that people in town, at least the way that I have read it, have a distinct memory and were very adamant that they had seen that Connie Franklin and Marion Franklin Rogers, while they bore similarities and sort of a striking resemblance, to the people who were arguing about this at the time, I think their position was no. I have met and interacted with Marion Franklin Rogers, who I'm looking at right now, and I also met Connie Franklin. And even though they're similar, I could tell that they're two different people. And I'm looking at Marion Franklin Rogers. He is not Connie Franklin. But then other people who maybe had casual interactions or had heard about both of them were like, well, it looks like Connie Franklin to me. I mean,
Yeah.
that's basically all they
But
had.
again, witness testimony completely unreliable.
But because you didn't have...
your brain can make these things up.
Yeah, because you didn't have fingerprinting, you didn't have DNA, you didn't have photo ID, any of that stuff, then that's in the days where you could claim to be somebody, like, to the person's father's face, you could say, I'm your son, and he could say, no, you're not. And then, like, what do you do from...
Who's
like, who
to
do you
say?
believe?
Yeah.
So that's sort of the part of the reason that I'm injecting, and I'm also there's some surreal imagery in there. It's, images of just a tree on fire or like kind of bugs slithering, and just to
the maggots.
Yeah.
Oh.
But just to like have these images that are sort of this otherworldliness of this story, that I think lends itself to that kind of impressionistic or expressionistic point of view, where like the imagery stands on its own, as does the narration, and we're telling this. We picked the version of the story that we wanted to tell, saying very like full well, nobody knows. That's the reason it's a story that's told. It's a mystery. And this is our version of it. So I think that that's the reason, as I started to get into it and try to make it to align to our format, I realized it doesn't have to. I can just tell this story. I can open the episode, change the aspect ratio, tell the story from beginning to end without chapter breaks, and it'll feel like a 30-minute short documentary, short film, with the style.
Well, and
of
you can
the time.
only explain so much with this. So it is kind of more of because normally with our format, we do, there's the story portion of it, and then there's kind of like the more factual, like what was going on in society at the time, more factual basis for the story, and then kind of a conclusion wrapping up, is this something that could have happened or not? Whereas like with this one, there's just not really anything that you can say as far as factual, because as we've said, like this story just spiderwebs in so many different directions. So I think the bulk of it is the storytelling for this.
I agree. And I think that's what's... I mean, I'm almost not... with the writing of it was different, more flowery, more expressive, and the feeling that you have is the feeling I want people to be captivated, but not in a way that like... where at the end of it, sometimes you're watching like a more traditional, even like an unsolved mystery or something like that, or maybe you're watching a documentary and you don't know how. I mean, unsolved mysteries kind of tips its hat in the beginning. You know it's
Mm-hmm.
unsolved before you start. But let's say you're watching a true crime documentary or a mystery documentary or something. You don't know how it ends. You've never heard of the story
Yeah.
before. And then it just ends. And they're like, well, we don't know. It can be a little dissatisfying, but I'm hoping that with the presentation that like that's I think if we do our jobs well, that's almost irrelevant, that people will really enjoy the experience of seeing
Well, I
it.
feel like it can be dissatisfying because I'm like a voracious sort of reader and listener of these like unsolved murders and things like that. But I think with this one, I think it can be disappointing if in your head you can come up with a clear-cut explanation, but that explanation just can't be proven. Like for me, that's where the disappointment lies, where I can say like, no, there is a very obvious reasoning, or there's a very obvious ending to this, but it's just something that for whatever reason through evidence or testimony or whatever cannot be proven.
Yeah.
But with this one, I think it's just so ambiguous and sort of I don't know, amorphous in a way. Like it's just so, I don't know. It's like such a weird, I've never really come across a story like this before where
Yeah.
it's just one of those things where it could be anything. Like you said, it is a choose your own adventure kind of thing. I mean, what is the explanation for this? Who the fuck knows? Like nobody knows.
And you could say,
can't
I mean,
can't even choose between two different things where you're like, well, it could be this or this.
well, I
No,
will say
it
that
could be so many things.
but it does. There are dependencies, right? Like you could almost start with, was anybody murdered that night? If so, who was it? Was it Connie Franklin? If it was Connie Franklin, then the mystery kind of goes away, because if Connie Franklin was murdered by those men that night, and Marion Franklin Rogers was an imposter looking for attention, or he was crazy, or whatever else you want to say, then the only mystery really, the only thing that we don't have access to is Marion Franklin Rogers' motivations. But other than that, the story is as told by Tiller, Bertha Burns, and the prosecutor. That's all true. And the murder took place. Connie Franklin was dead, or was murdered, and was never seen again because he couldn't be, because he was dead, and ghosts aren't a thing.
Well, I mean, they do say the simplest explanation is usually the right one.
Yeah. So I think as far as like applying Occam's razor to this, like on balance, removing speculation, that one tends to make sense. However,
Yeah.
it could be that if Tiller had an axe to grind, this is I mean, accusing 4 or 5 men of murdering your fiance who you know is not dead is pretty heavy. Like, you must be motivated to do that for some reason, probably beyond him just bailing before the wedding. Why those men? So if she did lie, so if Connie Franklin and Marion Franklin Rogers are the same person, that means that she knew he wasn't dead, but that he left town, assumed he wouldn't come back, made up this story, and thought, well, they're not going to be able to prove that he's dead, but they also can't prove that he's alive, so maybe I can take it out on these 4 guys. That's pretty draconian. It's pretty intense.
But it would leave her with, instead of the shame of someone leaving her, it would leave her with, like, sympathy rather than shame.
And you know my motto. It's been my motto for years. Bitches be tripping, you know?
Some bitches do. Yeah.
I never don't say that. I'm gonna cut that. that was just for Scarlett. But I think that those are the 2 paths that you have to like start from. And the first question is, did Connie Franklin die that night, or did he not? And we don't even know that. And I feel like you can't really answer any other questions until you establish that one.
Well, we don't. And then there's also the townspeople spoke of his ghost wandering the hills as well. I mean, was that just like garbage that was made up, or was it like, I mean, it could also be that Connie had some sort of psychotic break, and rather than
that's what he
Tilla dealing with like the shame of that, as, you know, the time would have dictated, she was like, oh no, he was murdered.
And I think that, it's so confusing, right? Marion Franklin Rogers and Connie. I mean, they share a middle name and a last name.
Both
But
very feminine names as well.
yeah, Marion and Con. Well, Connie is short for Conrad.
Oh, okay. I didn't know
Yeah.
that. All right.
But Marion is well, I think it's spelled with an O. So I
It's
think
like a
it's
boy named Sue. I don't know. It's just...
Johnny Cash. I the yeah, I just get lost in the names even, but the person claiming to be Connie Franklin said that he was beaten up and then he was wandering the hillsides in a daze for some amount of time, a long time, March
a
to
very long time. Yeah, almost a
December.
year.
Or March to whenever it was,
January.
January, because the outcry was in September. So, um, that's possible too. That was the story that he told, but then you have to ask, well, is it the story that Connie Franklin told? Because it was Connie Franklin who wasn't dead, or Connie Franklin was dead and Marion Franklin Rogers, who was a different person, told this.
Yeah.
And then there's even
It's
something
just, it's endless, isn't it?
Because both of these men were in and out of St. James over the Great Depression, the preceding years. They would come in when there was work and leave when there wasn't. I don't even. I mean, I've even thought that like there was only ever one of them, and the other thing is that Connie Franklin and Marion Franklin Rogers are also known to have gone by aliases. So were they always the same man? Would he come back to town and call himself Marion?
Something else, yeah.
Or
if he did have a psychotic break and he like didn't realize, or yeah.
So I basically, I mean, we just spent I don't know how many minutes talking about all the various. I kind of said fuck it and let's give the people a good show.
Yeah, and I think that's all you can do with something like this. It's just you have to speak to the feeling of it, which is what we originally said as well. You have to speak to the feeling of it rather than the facts of it, because there are no facts.
And editing for me is sort of like you asked about storyboarding, which I never really answered. And the storyboard for me is your voiceover. Like I need to either match that or juxtapose with that. So I'm looking for an image, and I think that it is sort of like playing music where the kind of the best stuff comes when you turn your analytical brain off and just decide whether or not it feels right. And so some of the images that I have, like if you would ask me necessarily like, well, why does that image doesn't belong to what Layla is saying? Why not that it doesn't work, even if somebody liked it, if you asked me like, well, what was your thought process behind that? I don't know that I would have an answer. It just felt right. Like it belonged there.
No thoughts, just vibes.
No. Yeah, I'm young, dumb, and full of vibes.
Full of vibes.
But so no, I don't storyboard really at all, because I mean it's so like the reason for storyboarding for a film production is because production, like pre-production, is so cheap compared to production. So you want on the day, you want to have all of your shots as blocked out and thought out as possible.
You also need to know where things are going to a certain extent with storyboarding as well. I feel like with this, you don't necessarily need to know where it's going. I mean, you already know where it's going because of the voiceover, but you don't necessarily need to know where the images and the storytelling, the visual storytelling is going.
So it's really kind of intuitive. I mean, even on stuff where there's more fact-based, it's more intuitive for me. And I am a big fan of juxtaposition. I like to have layered images and play with the opacity. So like one image will become prominent and another one will. I think I really started to get into that with the sharks episode, where I would give you never show a shark attack, but have a person and a shark occupying the same space on screen, even though they're not connected, to give you that impression, even if the shark is low opacity and sort of swimming across the screen. And so I don't like, sometimes I have very definitive, like, I mean, the other one that I'm working on right now, the Betty and Barney Hill, I
Mm-hmm.
had things that I knew that I wanted
Spoiler alert.
to present. I had like very distinct shots in mind
Mm-hmm.
that I can render, and I have those sometimes, but not from beginning to end. And even like I'll send you progress cuts as I go, and it evolve. Like things change. Like even if
Oh,
you don't give me
100%. Yeah.
notes, I'll take a break from something. And actually, so that I mean, just for a little bit of context, this will be the 6th episode, and the reason it wasn't number 5 is because it was killing me, and that's why we did common parlance, because that was so simple. I think I've been working on this for 5 weeks,
Yeah.
and it just takes the time it takes
Well,
to be
something
done.
like this that is more cinematic and more visual, do you feel like that just does inherently take longer than something that follows the normal format?
It does, especially if like there's a lot of stock footage and newspapers and stuff
Mm-hmm.
like that. You don't have to get that creative because you can just throw a newspaper up or a stock like a news like CBS broadcast of a trial.
Mm-hmm.
I think a lot of people when they're doing storytelling, they tend to choose more modern things because then they can just play B-roll of the trial under their
Yeah.
over their narration, and the people who are that's fine, and there's a place for that. That's not what I'm interested in or what we're doing. So it's but the more resources you have, the better, like the easier it is. But I almost like I enjoy being up against it and not like having to kind of get creative. I think if you like, there are some like true crime channels who they literally will just play a 3-hour interrogation and pop in every 15 minutes with a thought, and
Yeah.
that's their whole video. They're not doing anything. They're not necessarily adding anything
They're
to
not
it.
creating.
They're playing an interrogation video, which could be
Yeah.
riveting, but it doesn't have anything to do with them. They're not telling a
Mm-hmm.
story. Um, so it's easier, like the more resources that you have available to you, using in this context. But I'm almost happy in this one. There is no film footage. There's no
Yeah.
television footage. There's very
Well,
like
this is born of the visual, well, the visual and the written is born of your imagination.
yeah.
I mean, it's all, this is a piece of you, really.
Yeah, and also like because I want to do more of this, and for the next one I'm doing a very like a 1950s Technicolor B movie style, and I think that we can jump around a little bit. Like I think
Yeah.
obviously it'll be your voice, the music, my editing, but I think that we
Yeah,
can.
there's a through line, but it doesn't have to be the same.
But then we also have like I think because you really like common parlance has gotten a good response, and we've got some other like the common
Really
series.
good response. Yeah.
And I've had started putting together notes for something about common sense, which I think would lend itself to the original format. So we can always go back to that, but something like the next 2 that I'm working on, I'm thinking more of as just like, short films that don't have those. Like, if you're going to watch it, like, I'm not going to give you any hints about where to jump to in the time code. You just got to watch it.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah, definitely one you need to watch rather than just listen to, I think. I mean, you can just listen to it, but it's going to give you a completely different impression than if you watch.
It would actually be interesting to like, to do like a focus group of like 2 people who only listen to your narration with the music, and then 2 people who like completely keep them separated, and then 2 people who watch it and then ask them what they think happened and how the visuals would influence their feeling about it, which is kind of the whole point.
Yeah.
You know, it's the whole point of film, right? It's it's to be evocative, to evoke some sort of an emotional reaction that lies beyond the story, hopefully. That's my goal
Well,
anyway.
do you think a story like this could be spun today? Do you think something like this could, I mean, something with just so many unknown variables, do you think something like this could happen today?
It would be more difficult, right? I mean, I guess if it happens in the middle of the woods, but like for
Yeah.
instance, I mean, if the Connie Franklin, Marion Franklin Rogers thing couldn't happen because I mean, if somebody did that, they'd be like, okay, well, we'll do your fingerprints and DNA and
There's
look you
ways
up
of
on
identification.
yeah.
Yeah.
So not that part. I mean, I guess. I mean, probably there are murders that have happened where there's only one witness who hasn't come forward.
Mm-hmm.
Um, but like I'm sure there's a lot of unsolved murders more
Well,
than
this story has like a purity to it, I think, for that reason. Like, and I think you described it perfectly when you said it's a folk tale. And I think folk tales have this like purity to them
yeah.
because they can neither be confirmed nor denied. And it's not something that can really happen anymore because
No.
there are so many ways. I mean, of course, so many things slip through the cracks and you know, people are wrongly accused to this day. But something like this, there's just too many ways, too many checks and balances for a story like this to really spiral out of control in the way that it does with, you know, the folk tales and the retellings of things like this from 100 years ago.
Yeah. Yeah, it's kind of a singular, and I think like going all the way up to the beginning of our discussion here, the way that this has been presented is like focused on the like trying to like the theory, like telling the story, calling it a ghost trial, which I really is just not. I just think that's misleading, and
it does seem misleading, yeah.
But also sort of missing the point of what's interesting, but not really like, I don't know, expressing anything beyond like, well, here's what we know, and then at the end, most true crime or mystery podcasts and shows and be like, well, here's what's most likely, or here's what we think. And I'm like, well, great, but you don't actually
what do you think happened?
Yeah, but you don't actually know that, and so that's, like I said, it has its plays. I'm just, yeah, we're not doing that. We're doing something different than that. To quote John Cleese, I felt like it's time for something completely different.
I'm Layla Lawrence.
And I'm Dan Lauer.
And this has been Possibly Not.